Do you actually need fragrances, and how many do you need? Let's talk about this and other stuff in today's topic of conversation. Hello, welcome back to Seldomly Off, and I'm Daniel. Today we're talking fragrances, and this is the second episode of FragTalk, the more open-ended, conversational, free-form podcast-style format that allows me to talk about various topics, everything fragrance-related. I'm really glad you guys liked the first episode. You gave a ton of feedback, you left a lot of questions for the Q&A section, and overall, we're very interactive in the comments. I'm super happy of how that went. Today's episode will be all about how many fragrances you need, if you need any. We're going to be exploring topics such as the various fragrance user types, the difference in pursuing fragrances based on utility versus artsiness, the balance between the two maybe, how many fragrances you should ultimately have if that's even a number to be considered, and the overall fragrance acquisition method and curve. Again, these are all opinions, my opinions, they're all food for thought. I just want to open the conversation. This is mostly about your opinions, your feedback, and your interaction. I really want to underline the fact that everything that is covered in these episodes, including how to spray a fragrance, which was covered in the last episode, is mainly there to open a conversation, to fuel an interaction, and to fuel basically a thought. I would ultimately want everyone to be a little bit more conscious about what you're doing, put thoughts into action rather than being impulsive and following mindless trends. And this again includes me. I talk about this stuff because it really helps me visualize it. It helps me put it into practice. Just to recap how FragTalk works, each episode is broken down into 3 segments, the first of which is there to showcase my recent fragrance wears. The fragrances that I've been putting on, the fragrances that have been captivating to me in this specific moment. I'll give a brief description of each fragrance. I'll tell you why these have been my choice lately. And this is just a segment that allows me to showcase a lot more fragrances without being tied down to some sort of a rotation video. I can't really afford that workload wise, it's just too intensive. I also wear a ton of samples and I'm not really focused on what I want to wear all the time, so there's that. The second section is very simply a Q&A. You guys have submitted really great questions last time. I really want to preface again that the questions, you can submit personal questions and I'm happy to answer them, but I tend to choose and I tend to like questions that are more about the fragrance community, about you guys, about me, about everyone in the community, that are more open-ended and that they tend to open a door, that they tend to open a conversation. I have gathered all of the questions that you guys have submitted in the last episode. I will keep gathering all of the questions that you guys submit in the comments of each episode and putting them into a list. Sometimes I will rephrase them just to make them a little bit more quick and easy to understand and to elaborate. Sometimes I might just bundle questions together because it makes more sense. So please don't be offended if I slightly modify your question. It's all for the sake of fluidity. I also want to apologize in advance for not featuring the username of the person who has submitted a question. First of all, I modify the questions sometimes, or I bundle them together, so that kind of defeats the purpose. But also, I really want to avoid the pronunciation aspect of the username. It's really hard to keep track of everything, and I want to make this as fluid as possible. The third section is definitely the meatiest. It's where the daily topic will be covered. Initially, again, I'll be covering topics that I have in my head, stuff that I have on my list that I really want to talk about. But down the road, I might feature collaborations, interviews. Who knows? The sky's the limit. And again, if you have any suggestions, leave them down in the comments. I really appreciate that. Today, as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about the actual need of fragrances, fragrance users, and overall fragrance acquisition process and what to aim for. All right, let's kick it off with the first section of this episode. In some ways, I'm excited to talk about these fragrances. In some others, these are relatively boring fragrances, especially for me. But I've been somewhat sick, I've been a little bit ill, and I wasn't really in the mood to wear very heavy, very powerful fragrances. So I kind of gave it a break. Maybe the first one will not give you this impression, but let me get to it and explain. The first fragrance that I want to talk about is Anubis by Papillon. If you've seen my unboxing video of Papillon, you know that I've recently acquired a bottle of Anubis, and here it is, and a bottle of Salomé, together with 3 samples. Sampling and unboxing Papillon was a weird experience because I sprayed them on strip, as I usually do for my speed dating style fragrance videos. And to be honest, Papillon didn't really work out at all. These are fragrances that really need to be on skin. So much so that when I finally sprayed Anubis on skin at the end of the video, I was completely blown away by how different it smelled compared to paper. And this opens a really cool topic of conversation, which sort of ties into last episode's main topic. And it revolves around the idea of spraying on skin versus on clothes or paper to sample a fragrance, and which fragrances should be sprayed on skin, maybe which notes. It's really interesting stuff, and it's full of experiment potential, and I love experimenting. But back to Anubis, this is a really nice fragrance. I really like it. I've been enjoying it these days. And yes, I said that I've been gravitating towards more subtle scents, and you might be laughing at Anubis, but actually this is quite subtle in its presence, in its wear experience. It's a leather fragrance. It's quite rough. It's a little bit primal in a way, but overall it wears in a very elegant, very quiet type of way. And by wear experience, I mean both scent profile, because this is a very warm, very enveloping, very calming in a way type of scent, but also in the performance department, because I have to be honest, I was a little bit underwhelmed at first. This is, especially in projection, quite subtle. It fades off to a skin scent quite fast, and this is maybe a little bit of a complaint of mine to this scent. But overall, again, the more I wore it, the more I came to accept what it is. It's not meant to be brutish, loud, and in your face. This is a much more classical, historical, calming representation of Egypt, or maybe just past times in general. I really like this, and each full wear gave me just a little bit more of this fragrance to understand and to learn about. It's really cool. I really like the concept, and I can't wait to wear more. I highly recommend Anubis. You just have to know what it is. The second fragrance I want to talk about might be a little bit surprising to you if you've watched my videos. This one here is Bracken Man by Amouage. And surprising because in my first impression comparison video where I compared this to Penhaligon's Endymion, I wasn't actually too thrilled about this, and I said that it wasn't necessarily the fougere I was looking for at the time. I still stand by that, but I came across a stupidly good deal on this, and I had to just get it. I just had to get it. I basically paid 120 bucks for this almost full 100 ml. And yeah, I just couldn't pass it up, especially considering that this is a relatively highly rated, highly thought after, discontinued Amouage. I've been wearing it these days. This has been a really reassuring, very calming, very relaxing dad scent. And I already referred to this as a dad scent in my first impression comparison video, and I still stand by that statement. A dad scent is something relaxing, reliable, comforting. It's just kind of like the warm hug you never gotten, you know? And I don't know, I really like this. I think I'm mature enough to be wearing this. This could be easily a signature scent, year-round signature scent at that. This is a very beautiful, dense, complex fragrance. And again, these are all facets that I recognized in my first impression comparison video. I just wasn't really into owning maybe such a versatile daily type of fragrance. But ultimately, now that I have it, I don't regret it at all. I really like this, and it's been beautiful. It's been relaxing. It's been dense enough to kind of like mitigate the coldness of this winter. Really, really good stuff. I would highly recommend this if it wasn't discontinued. But if you can get a sample or even a bottle at a decent price, do not overpay for this. Go for it. You can always resell it later. If this appears to be an impossible thing to get, fear not. This is a relatively common scent profile, maybe not to this very beautiful complex degree, but there are many options out there that kind of mimic this feeling. One of them being Bois Mystique by Ubigant, the other one being, what was it? Orto Parisi Viride. They all kind of smell similar in a way, very beautiful. Again, very calming, very serene, very reassuring. So yeah, I really like the scent profile. I'll be wearing a lot more of this, so I guess I was lucky. My last feature is my usual Oddball. This is basically the fragrance that I wear when I do not want to wear a fragrance. It's very subtle, it's very unobtrusive, but has this aura of weirdness that really makes stuff interesting. We're talking about Ghost in the Shell by Etat Libre d'Orange. I got this relatively recently. I got this, when was this? Part of the Black Friday haul or something like that. I always wanted this. I was always intrigued by the concept of this and by the references. I like Ghost in the Shell, both the anime and the manga. the original ones, by the way. I never really liked the new movie, that was kind of mediocre. But overall, again, the concept of this was super interesting to me. Etat Libre d'Orange is a house that I really like. They're really innovative and artistic. All of their fragrances have very intelligent references. And this one here, again, was always on my radar. I got it for a stupidly cheap price because it was heavily discounted, so I couldn't really pass it up. Now, I am kind of disappointed in what this is. This was described to me, well, in the reviews at least, as a very artificial, human smelling type of fragrance. This was supposed to be something like the way AI or the way some sort of a machine would perceive a human or would think that a human smells like. The reality is that this is one of those almost molecule type scents. It's very subtle. It has this very mild, very subtle, citrusy, clean type of feeling. If you want to perceive it, you have to douse yourself in it. If not, it will be an incredibly low, lingering type of smell, very much a skin scent smell. It smells, again, clean. It's very beautiful, and that's why I regard it as my fragrance for when I do not want to wear a fragrance. This is my fragrance that basically gives me a break from all those heavy scents. If you spray this, especially after a shower or after washing, this works exceedingly well. It's very relaxing. It smells, again, it smells clean. It smells cuddly in a way, but there's not that lactonic note that I was expecting. There's not that synthetic type of skin accord that I was expecting. It's just a very predictable, very subtle, very clean, very futuristic type of scent. Nothing really more. I was expecting a lot more edge, a lot more character, but maybe I have to still discover it. The bottle itself is super cool. It has even this rubberized finish on top. I love it. So I don't know. I'll just be wearing this a lot and see what happens. But this is, again, for the utility I gave it as a break fragrance, it's perfect. Now, as I mentioned, you guys have submitted a ton of questions. I have wrote them all down. I will not be answering them all. It will just take way too long. I really aimed for the first two sections of each episode to be more of an introductory portion of the episode, a little bit more of an appetizer of sorts, a little bit more of a life update if you want. So yeah, I'll be keeping it quite short. I'm not really sure how many questions I'll be answering. It really depends how much time I dedicate to each question. I'm thinking about 4 to 5. But let's give it a go and see what happens. All right, so first question is a quick one. The question is, what is the cheapest scent you own? I really have to go do some digging because, again, I bought some fragrances for extremely cheap. I got some fragrances on trade, which I haven't really classified as an acquisition per se. Sometimes I got them for a very good, favorable trade. So I don't really know how to classify them. If I would have to go at market value per se, I think that the cheapest fragrance that I own is Fleur d'Oranger by Fragonard. I've covered that in a full review a while back. I really like that orange blossom fragrance. I think that Fragonard is a really underrated house. It's a beautiful house from south of France, which makes very natural, very simple type of fragrances. And that's an absolute banger. It's probably one of my favorite, if not my favorite, orange blossom, orange fragrance. A really beautiful fragrance for the summer. Go check out my video because I absolutely rave about that thing. Second question is a little bit more of a meaty one, and it says, do listed fragrance notes always represent the scent profile? Well, you know where I stand on this. I don't think that fragrance notes necessarily represent the scent profile at all. Sometimes it's fairly predictable. Sometimes it's completely misleading. It really depends on your knowledge about fragrances in general, your knowledge about the house, and your knowledge about fragrance taste. The more you develop this, the more you will be able to predict what a fragrance smells like by the notes. So for example, I'm quite familiar with the house of Amouage, as you know, and I have a good understanding of how they treat certain type of ingredients. So it's relatively predictable to me of what a scent would smell like. Not always, because Amouage is, again, a very complex fragrance house, but overall, I can sort of understand if I'll like the scent or not. Now, Amouage might not be the best example in actuality because I like most of their scents, so that doesn't really apply. But overall, again, if you learn about a house, if you learn about how they work with certain products or notes or ingredients, you might have a little bit more of a better chance to predict what's incoming. But overall, my recommendation is take notes with a massive grain of salt, if not a mountain of salt. Because take, for example, tobacco, which is a note that I really, really like. Tobacco smells radically different fragrance to fragrance. In something like Naxos, the tobacco to me is barely detectable. It's a very mild note that gives a slight bit of edge. In something like Royal Tobacco by Amouage, the tobacco note is front and center. It's very heavy, it's very bitter, it's very pungent. So they smell completely different. Do not base yourself on notes. Notes could be used to sort of narrow down a scent profile, but I much rather rely on the unreliable smells like section on Profumo and Fragrantica. And I say unreliable because some of the comparisons that people state are completely off and invented. They're pure fantasy. But that being said, I still think that that feature is more reliable than just looking at fragrance notes. Third question is a rather fun one, and it states, what's a strange genre or category of scents that you like or wish existed? I'm fairly open-minded when it comes to categories. I don't really like to just rely on one single category. I don't really have a favorite type of category. My preference usually varies upon my mood, but something that I was always super into, at least the idea of, was fragrances based on movies, especially horror. I'm a huge horror fanatic, and I would love to see a line of fragrances that is inspired by famous horror titles. I'm totally aware that they are officially licensed products based on horror movies, but I feel that those are a little bit more gimmicky in a way, and that they're not really serious perfumes perfumed by serious perfumers. So I would like a really good house to tackle this sort of topic, maybe in a collection. Yes, there are houses that do that in a subtle way, like Beaufort London. They're not really referring to a specific type of movie, but all of their fragrances are very dark, very smoky, very horror themed in a way. I really like that aspect, but it would be really cool if we had more stuff like But Not Today by Filippo Zorcinelli, which is a clear reference to Silence of the Lambs, or the other one, Always by Filippo Zorcinelli, which is a clear reference to It. Super cool stuff. I really wish that there was more of that, and even expanding beyond the horror genre. How cool would it be to have a fragrance inspired by something like Indiana Jones, or by, I don't know, by other stuff, by Star Wars, you know, just like even very popular franchises, but that would really capture the iconic essence of those films. I think that it's a super cool idea, and I would love to see someone have a go at it. The fourth question is something that we're going to be tackling entirely in the main topic of conversation of today's episode, but I'm going to read it out anyway, just to give you a teaser of what's coming. What are your thoughts about looking for the balance between price and quality? How many fragrances should the regular person have? So yeah, stay tuned for that, because we're going to be covering that and much more. The last question I want to tackle today is another meaty one. I'm going to be barely scratching the surface here, and it's a controversial topic, so bear with me. The question is, what is your opinion on cheap colognes? Now, I have already taken part of this conversation, clearly stating my stance in the comments of one of CG Scent's videos, where I stated that basically I'm against cloning of fragrances. I don't like clones, I don't support clones, and I don't like the idea of clones. My main argument being that I'm very much against the theft of intellectual property. I'm very passionate about this. I've been working in communication and someone in arts all my life. I do value ideas. I do value the way someone expresses something, and stealing that away from an artist or from a thinker is completely unforgivable to me. You might say that the clone houses are actually providing a service to the consumer. They're not breaking laws because there's no legislation in place. You might also say that the perfumer, the artist in this case, is not really benefiting from the profits, and all these profits are going to these massive corporations that don't really deserve it. To that, I have to reply that the perfumer is a willing employee of said company, and that they decide to provide their service and their artistry for said company. No matter who created that, the company owns that concept and idea. It requires R&D to come up with an idea and concept. Sometimes it's a snap of fingers. Take, for example, Lorenzo Bazzaglia. He openly disclosed in an interview that it literally took him 20 minutes to come up with Escobazzo. Is that a good justification to clone the hell out of his fragrances? Not that I'm saying that it has happened or not. It's just in general, in principle. Is that a good justification? No. Should the price of a Picasso painting be based on the cost of materials of that painting, namely the canvas and the oils? Absolutely not. You are paying for the idea, you're paying for the artistry. Picasso's not even making money off his stuff. So again, it's a similar type of situation. It's a very, very complex topic. I will cover this whole thing in a separate episode in due time where I better articulate my thoughts, and I try to be a little bit more unbiased and give both sides of the coin the time and the light that they deserve. All right, time to talk about the meat and potatoes of today's FragTalk episode. We're going to be expanding on the concept that I teased in the opening. Do you actually need fragrances? Once again, given the fact that this is a relatively controversial topic or can be seen as so, I really want to underline that this is just my opinion, and it's not my opinion towards people. I'm just giving out food for thought. I don't want to categorize anyone. I don't want to judge anyone. This is more like a kind invitation to think things over, to be completely honest with yourself, and to better position yourself for the future of your fragrance purchases and your fragrance utilization. And I'm absolutely including myself in the conversation. No one is being judged. This is just opening a topic of conversation. I really wanted to point out being true to yourself because that is absolutely crucial for this exercise. If you're not open to accepting what type of fragrance user you are, you will never get out of that tunnel. You will always feel pressured to purchase something that is not felt, that is not yours, that will not be utilized. And that is absolutely massive. And one of the first questions to really ask yourself and answer is, what do I really want to get out of a fragrance? While we all think about that answer, let me just go back to my original question that I teased in my intro. Do we actually need fragrances? The answer is no, we do not need fragrances. There's no need here. Yes, there's some utility aspect, but you don't really need a fragrance to succeed in life. You don't need a fragrance to be liked. You don't need a fragrance to get compliments on your persona. I've gone years without wearing fragrances. I always liked, enjoyed, and appreciated fragrances even as a kid, but there was a massive period of my life where I went along without wearing anything. I was just wearing basic deodorant and I wasn't even paying attention to the scent profile. I just wanted to come across as clean and put together. And the lack of fragrance really hasn't stunted me in any way possible. To this day, even though I now wear a ton of fragrances, a ton of weird fragrances, a ton of very, very expensive fragrances, I never get compliments. Maybe it's due to the culture I live in, maybe it's due to my personality and persona, but I never receive compliments. And no fragrance, no matter how expensive, has ever advanced me in life, has ever given me some opportunity that I've missed without wearing it. So just to cut it short, no, we don't need fragrances, but we're not here for that. We're here because we like fragrances, because we want fragrances and we appreciate fragrances. That's a huge difference, and that is the first step to understand. Now that we've pretty much established the fact that we don't actually need a fragrance and it's more about wanting a fragrance, we can safely disregard all those videos titled 10 fragrances that every man needs, 10 fragrances that you need to have, the 10 fragrances that you need in 2025. All that is just bullshit. Do not absolutely feel pressured by any cheap marketing ploy. This is all about what you want and what you want to achieve with your fragrances. Now that we establish it's more of a want, we have to understand the various levels of users. And by levels of users, I don't mean that one level is better than the other or it's more advanced or anything like that. It's just different type of users. To simplify things, the various users differentiate themselves according to where they sit on a scale of what they're interested in a fragrance. This scale ranges from the more utilitarian approach to fragrances to the more artistic appreciation of fragrances on the other side. And wherever you sit, it's absolutely fine. And you might actually find yourself sitting in both sides of the same scale. You might find yourself sometimes going for more artistic fragrances and sometimes going for the more utilitarian approach to fragrances. It's absolutely fine. And actually having a varied repertoire of fragrances that cover each aspect of the scale is a very healthy and very open-minded approach. But if you sit at one end of the scale or the other, for example, I tend to sit at the more artistic appreciation end of the scale for fragrances. I like fragrances that tell a story. I don't like fragrances that have utility. And again, I'm not putting myself above people that want fragrances with just pure utility. It's just a different type of approach. It's just a different type of want. I do have fragrances that sit on the more utilitarian side, but they don't excite me as much. I just use them as utility. I use them as an accessory. Let's try to give a little bit more of a realistic approach to this scale, giving some examples. On the far utilitarian side, we have deodorant. Deodorant is basically a product that we all use to smell good, to not smell like BO, and just to be clean and presentable. That is pure utility. Almost no one buys a deodorant because it smells good or because there's an artistic intent behind a deodorant. You don't buy Dove because it's created by a certain perfumer that has a certain history, that has a certain message to convey. You buy it because it works. It works at suppressing BO. It works at suppressing bad smells. On the other far end of the scale, we have those uber niche houses that create products which are statement pieces, which are basically unwearable. They're borderline stinky, they're unintelligible, and they're art pieces in itself. I'm thinking about houses like Toskovat. I have 5 Toskovat fragrances. I really like the house, but even I, that I like weird scents, I find these incredibly challenging. They're not meant to be worn almost. They're meant to be experienced. They're not meant to be worn in the office. They have basically zero utility, and they're so cryptic that you almost need a manual. You need the props, you need everything that comes with the fragrance to decipher what the scent is about. It's all about the story, it's all about the artistic intent, it's all about the messaging. In between those two extremes, there's a ton of stuff that is massively nuanced and evenly spread out. You can find stuff like Amouage, which is a little bit more kind of like in the middle, I would say. The perfectly balanced wearability with artistic intent. Some are a little bit more leaning towards artistic, some others are a little bit more leaning towards utilitarian. For example, Bracken Man. I feel that it's a very functional type of scent, and something like Miss Man is not functional at all, or rather, it has a lot more of a deeper messaging in it. In the middle of the bunch, leaning more towards utilitarian, you might find stuff like the Louis Vuitton fragrances, like Imagination, which I have. I love Imagination, I love wearing it. It's a very clean, not thought-provoking fragrance that I can wear without really thinking that I'm wearing a fragrance, without thinking about the messaging, without thinking about the occasion, without thinking about the mood that I need to pair it with. It's an easy wear. I love it. It smells good. It's definitely more on the utilitarian aspect. The Sergio fragrances kind of fall all over the place in the middle. A lot of them are edgy, yes, but they're also very, very wearable. So again, it's absolutely fine. The most important thing is, again, being honest with yourself, knowing what you want from your fragrances so you can better make choices and you can better purchase things that are designed for you and for that intent. And when I'm talking about fragrance users, I'm talking about groups of people that tend to sit in a very specific type of the fragrance scale. They might be leaning towards a more utilitarian side, towards the artsy style, or even in the middle. It's absolutely fine. And as I stated before, you might even be covering more than one type of user, and you might find yourself graduating from one user to the other. And I'm not necessarily saying that you're graduating from left to right or from right to left. There is no right and left. There's no more and less. And I'm really keen on the word graduating, because whenever you move from a category to another, again, left to right, right to left, and category, again, in air quotes, because it's not defined or anything like that, you have this newfound knowledge, newfound confidence, newfound know of what you actually want and what to actually expect from your fragrance journey. I've moved through the various categories basically all over the place. I started kind of on the more utilitarian side, then I started going towards the mid, then I went back to the utilitarian side, and now I find myself all the way to the artistic side. But that's mainly due to the fact that I've experienced so many fragrances that I'm kind of addicted to smelling something new. And I absolutely recognize that. That's almost a fault, because I do not appreciate, or rather, I tend to appreciate less very well designed utilitarian fragrances that have a lot to say and that have a lot of nuances in their elegance and in their style. And I, for example, I'm actively trying to move back to the utilitarian side of things, and that to me is graduating, because I do realize that I'm missing out on some designers, on some classic scents, some very simple, very functional, very elegant type of scents that I kind of disregard in favor of the more artistic niche stuff. And that's a fault of mine, and I'm trying to graduate towards the center of the realm again. So it really depends on you. If you tend to lean a lot more towards the utilitarian side of things, I do advise you to explore more niche, more artistic options, just because it will broaden your spectrum, but you don't have to. And on the other side, if you're a niche snob like I am, I do advise you to go back to well-designed designers, quality classic scents. It's really good to have the best possible range of information, the best possible approach, and just knowledge about the language of perfumery. But once again, despite my encouragements to constantly explore the fragrance space, to go out of your comfort zone, be honest with yourself. If you're the kind of person that only wants something out of perfumery, it's fine. Just stay where you are. The important thing is being honest with yourself. And even I often found myself trapped in a situation where I felt the need to purchase a certain type of fragrance that was out of my comfort zone, that was out of my scope of interest, just because it was good, just because it was the one that got you compliments, or the one that got you likes, or the one that was hyped by the community. The reality is, I didn't want to go there. And oftentimes I regretted the purchase and I ended up trading it off or selling it or whatever. Now, I'm in a position where I am offering a so-called service. I am talking about my fragrance journey. So I am incentivized to try new things and to give my experience on various things. And I generally personally benefit from being super open-minded about this sort of thing. But again, if you have a specific type of use case and you're pursuing a specific type of fragrance, it's absolutely fine. Do not feel pressured to lean into something that is not your nature, that is not your personal preference, that is not your comfort zone. And again, we talked about fragrance categories. It might be that, or it might be even a certain type of fragrance note or a certain type of fragrance scent profile. You might feel pushed in needing a winter scent when in actuality, you might not even like those scent profiles. You might not like dense scents. And you might even live in a place where winter is not even a thing. Just because the media says that these are the 10 winter fragrance that every man or woman must have. Absolutely not. That's complete bullshit. Ignore that fact. You have to know what you want. You have to know your preferences. Wanting to explore is not succumbing to the marketing. Wanting to explore is beautiful. I absolutely endorse wanting to explore. But again, I'm using wanting to explore. You have to want to get out of your comfort zone and explore. Not everyone wants to do that. Many people have very, very defined tastes. And if you don't like Amouage, ignore it. You tried it, you've been there, nothing really sticks, don't go there. I hope I'm not coming across as preachy. That is absolutely not my intent. I keep hammering this point over and over again because, as silly as it sounds, being honest with yourself and imposing that honesty over what is being told to you and what is being told that you actually need is actually quite difficult. And I'm a very, very confident person in my choices. I'm stubborn almost to a fault. I tend to refuse any external input on basically anything. Until I fully experience it myself, I will not accept it. And I'm actively working on myself. But again, you might have the opposite problem where it's really hard to say no. And you have to be honest with yourself. You have to understand what you want from fragrances, what you want from this fragrance experience. All right, now that we got the heaviness out of the way, let's move on to a little bit more of a fun topic. How many fragrances should you actually own? And if you know me, you already know the answer. My opinion is that there is no fixed number. Numbers are there maybe to guide yourself, maybe to limit yourself. Numbers are cool. I like projects. I like planning things. And usually I give myself a number because I really like to pragmatize my fragrance approach. The reality is, again, given the fact that I'm shooting a lot of videos, that number has been shattered multiple times. I really do not like owning a ton of fragrances. Looking at a bookshelf full of fragrances is something that gives me anxiety. Knowing that there's product there that has a value, that has a purpose, that is not being utilized is something that really drives me insane. And that's one of the reasons why I tend to sell everything that I don't use. And that's beyond fragrances. If I stop caring about a certain type of item or a certain type of category of item, I just sell it all away. And I'm weird, I take it to extreme. I'm willing to repurchase the stuff at a loss as long as I'm free from that burden in a way. So I tend to try to keep the number as low as possible within functional terms. Again, right now I'm doing reviews, so I need a little bit more fragrances up there just to showcase, just to sample and compare. But for the regular user, for the regular frag head, imposing a number, I think it's actually quite healthy because it, in a way, it limits your thoughts. It kind of gives you a plan to follow. And giving you a number and sticking by that number also really helps budgeting and finances, because once you reach that limit, you basically set yourself in a mindset where if you want something else, you need to get rid of something. And again, some people might be opposed to selling fragrances or trading them off. That's absolutely fine. And I was having this conversation in the comments with someone, and we were talking about how it's really good to go back to fragrances. And if you sell stuff off, you never really have the opportunity to go back and revisit. I totally subscribe to that. It's just more important to me to give stuff off and to move stuff away because it's better for my mental health. Again, it might not be for you. And you might not even want to fix a number. You might want to be happy in accumulating and collecting and having various of the same house. And again, it's absolutely fine. As long as you know what you want from your fragrance journey, and again, I'm really focusing on what you want, be honest with yourself, it's absolutely fine. I suggest you have some sort of a laid out plan because it helps keep things under control. Because I'm fully aware that compulsive collecting, purchasing, and to a degree hoarding can easily become an addiction, which is very, very difficult to escape. Many videos have been put out there by other fragrance reviews. I will not talk about this at the moment. But having a plan of action and knowing where you stand really helps to keep things under control. And it's always for the better. You can always flex that plan a little bit. It's absolutely fine, again, if it's your choice. But establishing boundaries is good. It's good practice in general, and that's something I really subscribe to. I think that's it for this segment. I could talk about this for hours. I really want to hear your take. I really want to hear your opinion. Let's just further the conversation in the comments. If you want me to revisit the topic, if you want me to expand on the topic, I might do it with someone else. It's a lot more interesting when there's a debate. I don't really feel super comfortable about, again, talking about this alone. It feels a little bit preachy. It's absolutely not my intent. So I really hope I sparked your interest. Hopefully none of this talk was even necessary to you because you know exactly where you stand. But if not, maybe food for thought. Maybe it's time to revisit your priorities. Maybe it's time to shift your fragrance approach and stop being influenced by media and just other videos. Again, I try to be unbiased as possible. I'm not saying that my videos are better, that they are above this, or that they are exempt from being biasing. I'm absolutely aware that if I put out a very enthusiastic review, I am somewhat conditioning you towards not a purchase, but maybe an acquisition or a thought about that fragrance. It's unavoidable. I can't do anything about it. I just try to push caution and skepticism in everything I do. I love skepticism. I love the idea of thinking for yourself, and I love the idea of making your own choices, informed choices. If you like this type of content, if you like my approach to video, feel free to subscribe. It's always massively appreciated and helps the channel. If you want to interact with me, leave a comment, suggestion, opinion, or anything else down below. I always reply and I always keep the conversation open. Thank you so much for watching. This is a super long video. Many more normal reviews to come, many more first impressions to come. Stay tuned. See you in the next one, and cheers.